Hey, what's going on, guys? My name's Alex McCreery. This is the Spear podcast, and we're going to start it off with an interview with Zoma, who is a writer for the Spear. She broke the breaking news on the unfortunate passing of Deshaun Packer, and our interview kind of consisted of kind of what we know so far about the story, and also she gave us some really good insight on who he was as a person, as a former football player for the Spartans, and also him as a police officer, which is what he ended up doing after college. So hope you guys enjoy.
Okay, so hi, I'm Zolma. Um, so I guess like from my point of view and what we found about Dejon Packer, just his time here at SJSU, um, just from like seeing all his stats and like the highlights and things like that, it kind of a buildup of like his time here on as a as a Spartan and everything. Um, from what I saw was that like it wasn't until his second season was that he was kind of like climbing up. Like I guess some would say like he was getting even better and better after each, play and everything. Um, like he for one of his during his second season he had like 10 carries over like 41 yards, and this was an opening game against UC Davis. Um, and I sort of mentioned how it was almost like a preview of what was to come from him. He gave it his all. And there were two games that stood out while just like researching things on him about like his time here. What the first one was with Fresno. It started out as kind of like, oh, SJSU is gonna kind of like not take the win today or that day on the game. And it wasn't until like the second half of the game that it picked up, and the Spartans caught up, and it was a 16-10 win for us. And another game that really stood out that he even tweeted himself. It's still up on his Twitter page, and it's even pinned, where he tweeted himself a quote, a moment he will never forget, which was when he scored the winning touchdown against Arkansas. It first started with like him with the team being a tie. It was 24-24, and then Packer like made a touchdown and it went to 30-24. And this since 2016 when they won that day, it was already 2019. So literally like after 13 years, it was like such a memorable moment because with I mean 1 year compared to 13 years is like a lot. So it was like very important, and I mean to the point that like he shared it, and even now people are remembering that like throughout like he accomplished something like that, and people were like looking for him like, oh, that's him, he helped the Spartans. And so just like looking at what he like his history and all, even through this whole like coverage, it was kind of like, oh, he was like a essential part of the team. Even though like despite like his passing and everything, people were just like remembering everything, what he did. We I interviewed a friend of his from high school, and he like verbatim he was saying how he just lit up a room like with his humor, with his like his presence and everything. Like he was just a down to earth person. And you know especially like, I mean, I was thankful that like a friend of his like was comfortable enough to share that, since I started reaching out like right after like receiving the news that he passed away and everything. And it was like I don't know how to say this, but um I was like, thank you for the friend that shared something like that, because even through like Twitter, people were just sharing how, oh, I used to remember him. He was such a nice guy. Oh, I used to remember his plays and everything. Oh, like he will be missed like so much. Like people were just coming on Twitter, Facebook, and everything, sharing how like how nice of a person like he, other than like him like accomplishing things for the team for SJSU, he was still like, I guess, spreading like a lot of other like his energy into other parts of his life. And then we found that like his reasoning for like becoming an officer was so he could like he actually quoted, I'm quoting this from the East Bay Times. He says, "For me, it's about wanting to not be able to make a difference and show kids in low income areas, kids who look like me, they can do this job." So even then, despite like him majoring in health science, like he, switched his path into becoming an officer to continue making a change. Especially for someone who like looked like him, like a person of color. He wasn't just an athlete, he was like much more than that, which what we saw from either like the interviews he gave or like just people who were willing to share who he was as a person before, his sudden passing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, really well said, and it's so sad that he really died at a young age. He was only 24 years old. So yeah, it's really tragic. Do you have any updates so far? Have you heard anything other than kind of the stuff that you reported on your breaking
Mhm.
news story?
So far I keep, checking to see if we have like anything from like the police department themselves or like even the coroner's office, but it's still under investigation. Like they still like I mean the last update they gave us was that the report that, he was involved in a homicide. That was the only like official like the latest update that wasn't he wasn't related to that case at all. Since that
Mhm.
did come up, while like looking into what was going on, that did pop up. People were like other like I don't want to give them like any recognition, but other websites and things like that were saying how, oh, that was him, he was in a stabbing, but the police department was just like, no, he was off duty. I mean, he had worked a shift before his passing, but when he like suddenly passed away in his home, he was just off duty. He wasn't really you know on the job. So I mean, they're still like they're still investigating as far as we know. Like it wasn't he wasn't like killed or anything. Yeah. So it's
Thomas, do you have any follow-up questions?
Like we know the highlights, we know all the other things that this guy accomplished on the field for the Spartans, but just what's the Dijon in just a few words? What's the Dijon that his family and his friends are gonna know?
I feel like the his high school friend that I like quickly interviewed, that I was able to interview, I had asked him like, "Oh, like what's do you have like a core memory of his?" And he basically said, which I feel like a lot of people will relate to, like, will remember him by, is he said, and I quote, No, every memory I have with him and others have with him, they all stand out. That's the kind of man Dijon was. Any moment with him would have been a memorable one." So I think, outside of the sports, outside of football, that's what all his friends and family are gonna remember him by. Like all like the personal and the public memories, they're all just gonna treasure it forever. And with everything, I guess in other words, is Dejan was a very welcoming and like warm person for each individual, each person that he interacted with, and you know despite the circumstances, that's he left a, I guess, like a warm legacy for
Yeah,
those who knew him personally.
yeah. It sounds like he was a really
Yeah,
rare individual.
yeah,
Yeah, and definitely inspiration too for the younger community, because that's the whole reason why he got into policing was to make his community better. And it's
hmm,
so sad that it got cut short, because just that having that inspiration, he would have done so many good things. But thank you, Zoma, so much, for kind of explaining what we know so far of the situation, and going back on his legacy, not only as a Spartan but also a police officer. So thank you for letting us interview you. If you have anything to shout out, like a Twitter, so people can follow you for updates, shout it out.
yeah. Well, thank you for having me. As far as this case keeps going, we're gonna continue to watch for any updates. You can follow at ZulmaC05 on Twitter.
Yeah, and then also keep in touch with the Spear SJSU.com, and we have an article up there that Zoma wrote that will also be updated when we know more information as well. So yeah, thank you, Zoma, so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
San Jose State Spartans 69-67 overtime loss to Fresno State. All losses are not built equal. Some will fade from your memory like a random dream, and others will be etched into your memories museum for a long time. This one was the latter. Story by Matt Weiner.
In case you missed it, tennis drops fourth straight match in San Francisco. San Jose State's women's tennis traveled to San Francisco last weekend and lost to USF 4-2. This was the Spartans' fourth consecutive loss after starting the season out a sturdy 3-1. Frustration was the theme of the day on a chilly and windy day at the Goldman Tennis Center. San Jose State will look to snap their 4-game losing streak against St. Mary's on March 16th at 1 p.m. Story by Jose Garcia.
Gymnastics flips with Pac-12 Washington ahead of MPSF championship. The Spartans gymnastic team went head-to-head with the energetic Washington University Huskies team and fell short to a tune of 196.900 to 195.400. Jada Missouri earned first-place honors with a score of 9.925 on the bars event and earned first-place honors on the floor competition. Missouri notched a score of 39.933 overall, which put her in first place. Story by Naveen Krishnan.
Limargo headlines women's swim at CSCAA Invite. San Jose State swimming and diving team finished top 20 at CSCAA National Invitational Championship, a 3-day meet hosted in Elkhart, Indiana at the Elkhart Health and Aquatic Center. It marked the final team event of the season for the Spartans. The meet began on March 10th and ended on March 12th. By day 3, the Spartans accumulated 165.5 points, which put them in 13th place overall. Story by Courtney Kreitner.
SVC to Day 1 softball trade wins with Idaho State. San Jose State softball welcomed Idaho State Friday, kicking off the Silicon Valley Classic 2. The Spartans dropped the first game of a doubleheader 2-1. They won the second game 5-2 after a wild 6th inning. Story by Jose Garcia.
Baseball self-destructs in 4th inning, falling to Nevada 12-7 on Friday. San Jose State lost to the University of Nevada 12-7 in a game originally within its control. Spartans dropped to 9-5 on the season and have put an end to their 3-game winning streak. Story by Aiden Bostich. Spartans mauled by Bears, struck by Tigers in the pool. San Jose State women's water polo team saw back-to-back losses this weekend against Cal 12-5 and Pacific 8-7. The Spartans started Saturday's match against the Golden Bears cold, cloudy, and bleak. Desperate to pass them or go into overtime, the Spartans looked for openings in their final minutes but were held off both times and losing both games. The Spartans return home against Santa Clara on Tuesday at 10 a.m. in the SRAC pool. Story by Anthony Lasita. SVC Day 2, softball out-hits Utah State, outpitched by UC Davis on Saturday. San Jose State softball split Saturday's home doubleheader against a pair of Aggies, Utah State and UC Davis. The Spartans turned on their heat in their first game as they scored 6 runs in the first match against Utah State. The Spartans are now preparing for an upcoming conference 3-game series against the University of New Mexico. First pitch is Friday, March 18th at 6 p.m. Story by Sandra Yvette Santos.
SJSU pitching gets stonewalled by Nevada, allows 19 runs. Sometimes box scores are deceptive, and other cloudy representations of what transpired. Then others are opaque and tell you exactly what happened, kind of like the title of Snakes on a Plane. No spoilers, but it's about snakes that are on a plane. Story by Matt Weiner.
Snakes on a plane, Matt.
Snakes on a plane.
Golden Bears pummel Spartans to give SJSU fourth straight loss. An avalanche, torrential downpour, thunderstorm, however you'd like to phrase it, the Spartans allowed 17 runs to the University of California. The Spartans had a prime opportunity to complete an 8-run comeback during the early stages of the game, but couldn't strike while the iron was hot. Bad turn to embarrassment when the 9th inning came around and the Golden Bears turned Danny Garcia into a Huxtable. Loma Vita's Grand Slam broadcasts how poor the pitching staff has been over the past 4 games and a much-needed wake-up call as well. The 6 runs given up in the 9th gave Cal a new season high for runs scored in a single game, 17, and hits, 18. Said Coach Sanfilippo, "It takes a better effort all around, obviously. We've got to pitch better, and we are capable of pitching better." Story by Matt Weiner.
And that is all for the recaps for this week. But one more thing. The Spear magazines are out. So make sure to go pick them up. Make sure to pick these up at Dwight Bentel Hall. It's almost in the middle of the campus, so no matter where you are, you can pick one of these up. See this picture right here? I took this picture. So even if you don't care about the content, just pick it up so you can see my beautiful photo.
Yes, sir. And it is free. That's right. Free to pick up.
And if you can't pick it up, make sure to go to www.thespearsjsu.com, and there is a PDF version that you can read on your computer or phone.
Okay, I am here with Ricardo Garcia, reporter for The Spear. And Ricardo, you were covering Jamie Craighead Turner, the women's basketball coach who's just got fired. So real quick, Ricardo, what was the story?
Yeah, so after 9 seasons, with the program, they decided that it was sort of time to start a new chapter, for the program. I think, she had some contributions to the program that were significant, and we'll kind of talk more on that. But 9 years is a long time, and so I think, overall, I think it was time for a change. Like I said, it was a very long time, and to be honest, I think much of the results within those 9 years, with Craighead under, helm, were a little lackluster. If we go back, kind of to a couple of the previous seasons, the most successful season under Craighead was obviously the COVID season. Most of it got canceled, but it was a 2019-2020 season where I believe she took the Spartans to the semifinals of the Mountain West tournament. Did it twice in her stint as coach with the Spartans. So there was some bright spots, but overall, I think they can never just find that consistency, right? Within the season that she was in, I think it was always kind of lackluster. So overall, I think that's what they're going to move into, a new direction. They've got a young team moving forward. So I think, it's up in the air, and it could be looking very different, come next season.
So you talk about a lackluster performance. You talk about, the team needing to turn a new page in your piece and talking about a new identity. So could you go a little deeper into what that identity might be going forward, or why they didn't have an identity under Craighead Turner?
Yeah, so, I think, the biggest issue with this team, just, on the little that I did kind of cover them this past season, they had the pieces, to get it done. I feel like they were always consistent throughout the first 3 quarters of play, but I think their Achilles tendon, their Achilles heel was finishing, right? There was no sort of urgency to produce that same sort of quality basketball from the first 3 quarters and into that last period, which, obviously is the most important period. That's where you have to, wrap it up and finish. And I think a lot of times they fell short. But I think the new identity is really going to come in the form of the younger players. This year, we talk about losses, Jamie Craighead, but I feel like there's even more losses. 2 seniors who, were dynamic players, Sydney Lewis and Atiana Golden, are both going to be departing the team, so I think now the pressure kind of falls on like the younger players, Ella Ogier, the Australian phenom. We know she can take over games and really fill up the stat sheet. And then you have players like Stephanie Torres who can, when she's hot from beyond the arc, she can be deadly. So I think, we're going to see more emphasis on the younger players sort of blossoming and kind of taking on the roles that those seniors had, right? So I think that's where the new identity really is gonna lie in those younger players.
And you talk about closing games really quickly. I just want to touch on, because we're losing all of our seniors, and I think we're only going to have 2 juniors next year that are major players this year. That's Torres and Ogier. So, I guess, do you expect us to be able to close games next year with a really young roster and a new coach? Is that something that we can really expect right away?
I think it's going to be something that needs to be worked on. Obviously, it's not going to be something that's going to click right away, especially for a young team that might not have a lot of chemistry, right? So I think building that chemistry will sort of be the first priority for the team. But I think as they get into the later end of the season, right, maybe more into conference play where it really starts to heat up, they need to refine that ability to close out games, right? And that means shooting the ball well and working as a team. I think that's the biggest thing that sort of lacked, is just the teamwork and making it all flow, right? Unfortunately, when you're, I feel like, that player that can go out and get like 25 points or kind of fill the stat sheet and do everything sort of like yourself. I know that sounds selfish, but, you're hooping, you're kind of in the moment. But I think, for this team specifically, there needs to be an emphasis on playing team basketball, right? Passing the ball effectively. And I think that will get them, ultimately where they need to be in closing out games.
All right. Well, that's perfect, because it brings me right to my next point that we're going to talk about right here. Because when I look at the team's win-loss record, obviously it's, not what you want. But I actually was surprised, because Craig Turner did go, I think, 50 and 90. And I was like, well, a program like San Jose State, she did get 50 wins. That's not terrible. And the other thing is San Jose State in general, just as a basketball program, is not a high tier Division I program. You don't exactly get the top recruits coming to San Jose. They'd rather go, even in the Mountain West, they'd rather go to Fresno State or San Diego State and things like that. So I guess my question would be, if we bring in a new replacement head coach, are we really going to see different results from Craig Turner to a new person? Or would it might just be more of the same, just by virtue of San Jose State being San Jose State?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Thomas. And I really think it's going to just depend on the coach. Ultimately, there's so many coaches that have, different styles. And so, if they're the new person or the new coach that we sort of bring in has a completely different, attitude from, how Craig had sort of ran her team, then I think we genuinely could see a quick switch, but I really think it's going to rely on the coach rather than, I would say, the culture, because I still feel like, this is kind of a different sort of subject, and we can kind of talk about this, on a completely different episode, but I think it's becoming more attractive to come play basketball at San Jose State, even though, yes, it's not the most winning program, but I think, it's still sort of the Mountain West in general. There's just, how you kind of mentioned it, there's so many schools that are competitive within that conference. And I think even just having a chance to play in that conference for some players that are kind of in the transfer portal or maybe considering their options, it's a good option. So, but kind of touching back to what we were talking about. Yeah, I think, if a coach is able to really make their style work with a young team, I know it's going to be kind of difficult. I could definitely see quick change.
Right. So maybe not the Paige Beckers or the Sabrina Ionescu's, but we can get some talent in the Mountain West that we should be able to generate wins.
I think the new NIL rule and all that, is going to help us a little bit. That money, everyone likes to, we all like that green, man. But it's all lies. So I think eventually we might get there, but it baby steps for sure. But another thing I feel like I want to touch on just real quick that I haven't really said is kind of more emphasis on the conference play, because I think for the Spartans, like last season, that was one area where it was just conference play. I feel like for me is where you need to be playing your best basketball, right? This is your conference. Like, you need to prove why you are the best in, your conference. Right. And so I think that also sort of needs to be, however, I guess they sort of are able to work on that. But getting into that later half of the season, I think there needs to be an attitude shift, right? Like you have to go into conference play with a little bit more fire, and they lack that, and it showed in their record, right? I mean, their record was what? Let's see,
5-25. Oh, 20, yeah.
Overall 5-25, but 2-16 in conference play, which is just it's bad. It's bad. So I think that there needs to be an emphasis on playing better, in conference play, and eventually, if you do play better in conference play, you get that better seeding, in the tournament, and who knows, I think we're due for another good run in the tournament. I think that's San Jose fans have been waiting. So, yeah.
No, you're exactly right. And I wanted to touch on exactly what you're talking about, but in terms of Craighead Turner at San Jose State, not to take a shot when you're down, but she told me in a post-game interview that we have no identity. Like that's the head coach. That's what she told me about the team, which I was pretty surprised to hear that from a head coach, right? And so I went over, of course, and looked at the box score, look at the statistics for the year, and their style of play, just on paper, is very run and gun, very like quantity over quality in terms of like your shots, your looks, very inefficient in terms of shooting. I don't think a single Spartan shot over 35% from three-pointer except for Sydney Richards, and like basically no Spartan had above 40% on field goal, like overall field goal percentage. No one's over, like maybe a barely over 40%, which is really not where you're trying to be. And just a lot of the possessions when I watched them, they ended up just kind of wearing down the shot clock, and then the possession ended with a bad shot because they didn't really know where they were going within a single possession of the offense consistently.
And I feel like that sort of sloppiness on offense, that sort of not knowing, what is doing, is the fact that just they're not playing as a team. These are issues that can be solved if they were just more unified as a team, because then it would be easier to get these better looks. You're not forcing these horrible shots and milking the clock to get just like a terrible shot. Whereas if you're, passing the ball effectively and finding better looks, you're going to use the clock not only more effectively, but, make more baskets. You're going to shoot better. And yeah, shooting is just one area that, is specifically just finding better looks, right? Because their offense at times is very sort of just rushed and kind of independent isn't really the word, but I guess sort of just like not cohesive. Really.
No, yeah. Well, you're exactly right. And I guess what I was trying to get at here was, a run and gun, quantity over quality. That was a style of play accepted in the basketball in about, before the 90s, maybe in the 80s, 70s, that sort of thing. But nowadays you need efficiency, and it almost struck me as just like a really old fashioned way of playing basketball. And I just want to like ask you, do you think that maybe she just couldn't keep up with the trends, just couldn't keep up with sort of what other her competition would be using against her?
I mean, yeah, I could definitely say that that's a fair point to make. I mean, and I think looking at how long, she was sort of leading the team, you would think after how many years, hey, this isn't working, right? I'm going against these top teams in my conference every year, and they're doing it differently, right? And it's shown. And for, her to maybe just not see that, and maybe just not kind of make that read and continue to just do what she's doing, it wasn't good for the program at all, and it shows in the results. So, I think if she would have maybe, her first 4 seasons, how it went, and, if she needed to make those changes, if she would have made those changes, it would have been different. But I do believe that that's a fair point to make, that she just, the changes that needed to be made were not made.
All right. Last question for you. So a lot of talk around the team going forward is the amount of young players we have, specifically a lot of perimeter players. We only have, I think, 2 forwards that are underclassmen forwards that are over 6 feet tall. We've got a lot of guards, though, and a lot of guard talent there as well. So, but the team, in terms of fit, in terms of balance, it's not really there, right? You have a lot of great players in one position, but you really don't have a lot of forwards in that. That's going to be tough in basketball, right? My question is, how quickly can we judge Craighead Turner's replacement? Because we're going to have, they're going to come in and basically have to rebuild the roster, rebuild the program. Like, make sure to actually acquire some more forward talent, make sure to actually acquire some bigs and probably some shooters as well. So, like, can we bring in a new head coach and then maybe evaluate them 3 years down the line? Is that realistic to do?
You know, I don't want to say 3 years. It sounds like, oh yeah, that's a good amount of time. But I feel like even 1 year or 2 years would be a good number. And I feel like the reason why that is because there is already enough talent to work with, right? It's just about making it work, right? And you mentioned like, yeah, the lack of size is going to be a huge issue, I feel like, for this team, you know, going into the season, right? And that is something that they're going to have to address, you know, in the off season. But if they cannot address that and they have to sort of go with this smaller team, can the new coach develop a more maybe small ball plan, maybe something that's more suited for what he has to work with until sort of, you know, down the line they're able to acquire those players that can fill those gaps, right? So, you know, I do say we need to give them a little bit of time, but not too much time, because I still feel like there's tools there to work with. But yeah, I think there should be a little bit of time to sort of evaluate.
All right. Well said, Ricardo. So anything I should have asked you, any other points you want to get across?
You know, not off the top of my head. I think overall it's very up in the air right now. You know, I think before sort of the news broke, it was kind of, you know, I think people knew what we were expecting, another season under Craighead, right? We've gotten 9 seasons of it. But now this is kind of a curveball. So I think the season is still really in the air. And I think the overall team and sort of what style they're going to go forward with is still in the air. So, you know, we'll see, you know, closer to when that season comes again, what the team is looking like. But I'm excited. We'll definitely have to do some sort of, you know, revisit when it comes closer. So.
Awesome. Well, I love it. Ricardo Garcia, reporter for The Spear. Anything we can plug for you real quick, Ricardo?
You can follow me on Twitter. I am on Twitter, SJSU Ricardo G. Check out some of my stuff on The Spear. Thomas, thank you so much for having me, bro. I really appreciate you. Appreciate your time. And yeah, I hope we can do this again with Alex maybe next time.
100%.
Yeah.